we're just going to cover some of the stuff that come up after the Zelensky yacht story. Now, if you're not familiar with that story, a story surfaced about a month ago where supposedly the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky had bought 2 super yachts through 2 friends of his, 2 proxies. The boats were, the story was effectively that he was using money that he was getting to fight the war to buy 2 yachts. We looked at the story on the channel, and we very quickly came to the conclusion that the story was not true. In a few various different ways, we come to that. Firstly, the 2 yachts that were supposedly bought by Zelensky, they're still for sale now. So we're a month later, approximately, and those boats are still for sale. One of them was called My Legacy. It's for sale for 44.9 million euros. Still for sale. This has been confirmed by the companies. If you want to see the boats advertising, I'll put the link in the below of this video if you're watching on YouTube, and you can click on that link. But they're on the Burgess website, My Legacy, and the other boat was called Lucky Me, and that's on a Benmar website, benmar.com. I'll put the links below, as I said. When you know it's not a true story, then you look at the names of the boats and you say that whoever made this story up, they couldn't even resist. Instead of using some generic yacht names like, like there's some here, Ice Bear or Atlas, Bookends. These are yachts that are for sale on Burgess website, but they went with My Legacy, and the other one, Lucky Me, just to make people even a little bit more annoyed than they might have already been. The fact that of the potential of the using of fate of this money to buy these yachts. But like I said, we proved pretty quickly that was one reason, is that the boats are still for sale. We asked the companies at the time, have these boats been sold? They told us no, they haven't been sold. And then the memorandum of agreements, the contracts that were supposedly for these yachts to have been bought. We contacted the company that makes these contracts, and they said no, these contracts are bogus. They're not accurate. They said, first of all, that version of the contract hasn't been used for 9 years, and there's actually and those contracts that you showed me, that there are actually bits that have been doctored on those contracts to change the way they look. There was signature blocks omitted from the contracts and stuff like that. So they said that and it actually says in the wording of the contract itself that if there's any changes to this contract, or if it's not, if the contract is out of date, then the contract is null and void. So nobody's going to use a null and void contract, right? Everybody gets these contracts from the same place, and they're called the Mediterranean Yacht Brokers Association. All of the brokerages, or most of the brokerages, use their contracts because they are the best ones to use. I don't know the details of why they use them in particular, but that's what they all do. Now, the idea that 2 separate companies that are not connected in any way, Burgess and Benmar, would use the same, changed contract it's beyond the realms of believability, isn't it? It's like, you're not going to believe that 2 separate companies. Now, one comment that I did see is that they could have been drawn up by the same lawyer, but these contracts are written. These contracts are used by the different companies, right? And they're not going to use. They're not filled in by lawyers. They're filled in by the people, the brokers. Like I said, it's completely separate companies. And they're out of date, so they'd be null and void. No one's going to spend $45 million or 45 million euros, fill out a bogus contract, and then that effectively they're not buying that product. So it was a fake sale. It was a fake story, and the weird thing about it is that even after we posted the video, the majority of the people were like, oh, thanks for going through this, and I'm glad you showed that it's not a real story and stuff like that. But quite a number of people were leaving comments on the channel saying, oh, what you don't understand is this story's true, even though we showed that it wasn't true. And we contacted all these companies. We went to the source, which is what I always do if I hear a story, is I go and look at the source myself, because unfortunately, in this day and age, there are a lot of people who have agendas who look for stories like this to reinforce their agenda. The thing that they want to talk about, the thing that they want to push. They want to find anything that will fit with their political agenda. One of the places that we talked about at the time, one of the YouTube channels that had over 2 million subscribers, they ran this story based on the source was somebody who called himself a reporter, had no online presence at all, really, except for a Twitter page and a YouTube channel with one video on it, which was this video about Zelensky. And a lot of, if you search for the Zelensky yachts, there's a lot of websites out there. None of the mainstream news channels covered this story that I know of. There was 24, France 24 covered it, an English language version of it, which is a channel, a European channel. They covered it, and they did it 4 days after we did it, and they basically did the same thing. They talked about the contract being out of date, and they showed the new contract versus the old contract, etc., etc. So they did the exact same story that we did, but 4 days after we did it. So I think they must have seen our story as well. But if you search for that story, you found an awful lot of different places. They've used the source, this invisible guy with one story on his YouTube channel, and then they're pushing it. Now those places like the redacted channel, which ran the story, which is what I saw, or somebody said, a few people who follow our channel sent it to us, and I saw it on redacted first, and they're very convincing, right? Because they're telling the story, and if you are a regular follower of that channel, you have no reason to doubt what they're saying, because you assume, if they are journalists, that they are doing their due diligence on that story before they run the story. But they didn't. They just ran the story. They heard it. They ran it. For whatever reasons, they seem to be politically biased. The Zelensky story was actually picked up by some politicians in the US. And according to that, according to their own Twitter feeds, they even used it as a reason to not grant the latest raft of money to go to Ukraine to buy weapons and ammunition and stuff like that. Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the politicians who actually posted on Twitter she reposted the story, the original story about him buying these yachts, which obviously you now know is not true. The fact that the boats are still for sale as well should be another identifier for you that the stories are not true. And even the link that Marjorie Taylor Greene posted on Twitter has a box on it saying that that she's linking to a source that has been sanctioned by the US government as a propaganda arm of Russian Foreign Ministry that spreads disinformation. You've been watching a clip from our new Yacht Report podcast. Catch the full episode by clicking here. You can find a link to the new YouTube channel Yacht Report podcast down here. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.